Celine Latulip, and this is the NSERC Create User-Centered Design module. And in this video, we'll be talking about need finding, and this is part 1. So need finding is about understanding people and what they actually need. So for a particular project, you want to know what is it that people do now in relation to what you're thinking about, and what values and goals do people have? Are there activities that they are doing that are embedded in sort of a larger ecology, in their family, in their community, in their homes, in their workplaces? And what are similarities and differences between the people that you are interested in, the people who are in your target audience? So you want to understand all of this so that when you go to design something, you're designing the right thing and not the thing that you thought was needed based on your own assumptions. So we're really trying to check our assumptions at the door and understand the truth about what people need. And there are a number of methods: surveys, interviews, observation, focus groups, diary studies. These are fairly traditional methods. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the first two, surveys and interviews. So let's start with surveys. This is a method that allows you to get answers from a large group of people, because surveys are easy to deploy to many, many people, especially with today's online technologies. So you want to plan your survey and make sure that the first page of your survey gets consent. And if they don't consent, they don't get to go into the actual survey. And then you want to ask some background demographic questions typically. Ask your main questions and then a closing question, which usually provides an open-ended area where people can provide any comments or tell you what they think you should have asked them. Background questions are often about demographics and also maybe sort of the relevance to the subject matter, so task expertise or how frequently they use something or their education or literacy levels. Those things may be relevant for the rest of the data that you collect. So you want to be careful about the personal information, especially the demographics. You don't want to ask things like, how much do you weigh? What's your age? How much money do you make? Those types of questions seem fairly invasive, and you're going to lose people's trust if you ask those questions. So often what you want to do is translate that into a range, like, do you make less than $30,000 a year, or between $31,000 and $70,000, and that type of thing. And people will be more comfortable giving you those general pieces of information rather than the specifics. If you do really need to know the specifics for some reason, you're going to have to explain to the person why. And so you should just avoid that if you can. You want to be careful about word connotations, because when you're deploying a survey, you're not there to explain what you mean. And the words that you write can actually be quite biased without you even meaning them to. So these are 3 examples of the same question. Do you agree with the school board's decision to oppose the teacher's pay request? So that word there, the oppose, that actually it makes the school board sound like they're just really oppositional and mean. The second version says, do you agree with the school board's decision in regards to the teacher's pay demand? In this case, the school board's making a decision in a regard, they're not opposing, and the teachers are being demanding. So this is sort of biased against the teachers. So the third option is the most neutral. Do you agree with the school board's decision in regards to the teacher's suggested pay? It doesn't seem to suggest that either the school board or the teachers are in the right or the wrong. You also have to make sure that your questions are really clear, again, because you're not there to disambiguate for the person who's filling out the survey. So this question, how much time have you spent reading news on the web recently? If you use the options on the left, these are vague and ambiguous and mean different things to different people. So rarely might be once a week for somebody and might be once a year for somebody else. So the options on the right are much less ambiguous, and so you'll get more consistent and valid data from the options on the right. Likert type scale questions are really common in surveys, and they're really useful because you get numeric data that is easy to then sort of analyze. And so typically you want to ask somebody a question or give them a statement and ask how much they agree with it. And then the options are at sort of 2 ends of a spectrum with numbers in between. If you use an odd set of numbers, which is fairly typical, 5, 7, or 9, you end up with a middle number, which is a neutral choice. So you have to think about whether or not you want to give users a neutral choice. Often you do, but sometimes you may really want to force them to sort of go one side or the other. So at this point, we've talked very briefly about surveys. What I want you to do is take a minute, look at this set of survey questions, and figure out what's wrong with these. So pause the video, look at them, and then we'll continue. Okay, so I'm assuming you paused the video, you looked at these. So the first question is problematic because we're asking for precise information. We're asking them to write down their age. And we could have just asked an age range, like under 18, 19 to 35, etc. The second option is problematic because we have an overlapping range here. If the person has been using the internet for 3 years, they could check this box or the third box, and so that's problematic. In terms of the third question, this is problematic because we don't specify that they can check all that apply, and because we don't give them an option to specify some other source of information. And the fourth one, how useful is the internet in getting information about blah? Again, here we're sort of leading because we're saying the internet is useful. So that's a bit of a leading question. All right, let's move on to interviews and do a really brief discussion about interviews. So interviews are similar to surveys. You're asking people a set of questions, but interviews allow you to be more open-ended and to let people sort of talk and explain and maybe tell stories. So you can ask follow-up questions, and you have the opportunity to read the participant's body language and vocal cues and so on. And you have the opportunity to actually build up trust with that person, which can really help in getting valid data from them. So there are 3 types of interviews typically used: structured, semi-structured, and open-ended. And semi-structured interviews are the ones that are most commonly used in human-computer interaction research, where you have a set of open-ended questions. So every user answers the same set of questions, but you can ask particular users follow-up questions in response to the answers that they've given. And you can allow users to sort of go off on tangents and tell you stories and get some really rich data this way. So when you're doing interviews, here are some tips to think about. You really want to have a good narrative structure to your interview. You want to start with easy things, demographic questions, a nice warm-up question to get them talking, then your main set of questions, and a cool down where you ask them what else they'd like to tell you about. You want to avoid yes/no responses. You want to allow silence to happen. So you ask a question, and if the user doesn't answer right away, don't fill that silence by talking at them. Just remain silent and give them a chance to think and answer. And you want to remain positive and encouraging about their performance in answering the questions. Like, you're doing a great job answering all my questions. Thank you so much. But you want to remain neutral with respect to the actual answers they give, because you don't want to bias them to giving you questions that lean in a certain direction. A warm-up or grand tour question is really important after the demographics and background. This is a question that will help set the tone and get the participant talking. It should be easy to answer, but it shouldn't be answered easily, as in with a yes/no. So some good warm-up example questions are: describe the work you do. What made you buy the computer? These are things that are not going to be hard for the person to answer, and it will get them talking. So again, I want you to pause and read through these interview questions and think about what is wrong with them. Okay, so the first question: how much easier is it to use this email client than Outlook? Very leading question. You're assuming it's easier, and you're basically asking them to confirm that for you. The second question: I see you chose to use your keyboard shortcuts more than the mouse. Is that faster for you? You're actually providing them with an answer, and so the easiest thing for them to do is to just say yes. It's also a yes/no question, which isn't great. And the third question: your choice of red is different than any other user we saw. Why did you do that? This question is problematic because it's going to make the user feel weird, like they're a strange person or a weirdo, and you don't want to make your participants feel uncomfortable like that. So you have to be careful about your wording. So the last thing to talk about with respect to interviews is recording. And the best thing you can do is to video record, because you can capture their body language and the vocal cues, and you can end up with a transcript. If you can't video record, because sometimes people just don't feel comfortable being on video, you can audio record, and this still gives you all the vocal cues and the transcript, which is really important. If people are not able to be audio and video recorded, and all you can do is take notes. That is still worthwhile data, but it's really the worst option because you're getting your interpretation of what you were able to write down of everything that they said, and you can't write as fast as people can talk. So not as good. Okay, so to recap, need finding helps us center the people that are our target audience, and we can check the assumptions that we have and find out if they're true or not, but we have to be very careful not to bias them. We want to understand our users and the context they live and work in more fully. So surveys are good for gathering data from lots of people, but they don't give you the opportunity to follow up or understand deeply or more nuanced. And interviews are good for that deeper, more contextually rich data that you can gather, but typically you can do fewer interviews than you could do surveys. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.